What's up, YouTube? It's the Action Figure Grader coming back to you with another video, and I'm hoping that this will lead to some more general discussion from you guys as subscribers. I get the most out of making these kind of videos when you guys share your own thoughts, whether you agree with me or not. And this video is kind of a follow-up to the stagflation video I made last week, and the question as to whether we're going to be seeing a recession soon within the U.S. or globally, really. I mean, in Europe as well. I would argue that Europe is probably already in the middle of a recession and doesn't quite know it yet. I think that they're so dependent on Russian oil that it's just a matter of time before some of the after effects of what's going on over there is going to catch up with the economies over there. I hope I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong. But I think that the same thing is going to happen to the U.S. if it's not already. And the concept I wanted to talk about today is a flight to quality, and as it relates to collecting action figures. Is there a flight to quality during bad times? Not if, but when we have the next recession, what's going to happen with graded items? And I know that some of you don't like graded action figures. That's okay. You don't have to like it to participate in this video. But for the purposes of this video, I'm viewing graded action figures or any kind of nice, expensive action figures, Star Wars specifically for this video, but whatever you collect, as an investment vehicle, as an alternative asset class, a way to diversify, quote unquote, your portfolio of assets. And I certainly have done that, whether I liked it or not. I didn't set out to do that, but over time, my collection has grown in value so much because of the run-up in vintage and other kind of rare Star Wars items that I almost, whether I like it or not, it's another asset class within my kind of investment portfolio. And the question I have is, when the next recession hits, is there going to be a quote-unquote flight to quality? And we're going to talk about that. First, we're going to kind of define what that is. We're going to look at the difference in prices for normal graded items versus extremely high-grade items. We saw a few in the Hakes auction we're going to touch on again. And then I'm going to show you some other comparisons that just show you how willing collectors are to pay a premium for very, very high-grade Star Wars items. But are they going to continue to do that when a recession hits? Or is there going to be kind of a regression towards the mean, so to speak? And people start to collect a little bit less expensive items to take away some of the risk of having so much money in one particular item. We're going to touch on all of those topics. And as you guys see fit, please feel free to add your commentary below, because I'd like to do a follow-up as to what you guys think about it. So first of all, let's talk about what a flight to quality means. What is a flight to quality? A flight to quality occurs, and this is related to stocks, all right, or typical financial instruments that we invest in, stocks, bonds, things like that. But a flight to quality occurs when investors in aggregate begin to shift their asset allocation away from riskier investments towards safer ones. That's really the bottom line of what flight to quality means. As soon as there's a bad sign of something bad happening, whether it's stuff going on in Europe or everything that happened in 2020 with COVID, or some kind of big event, such as the 2007-2008 recession after Bear Stearns went under, Lehman Brothers, things like that. There are so many different things that can cause a flight to quality. And investors typically take them out of stocks, and that's why the stock market tanks during these kind of bad recessionary events, and they put them in safer asset classes like U.S. Treasuries, U.S. money funds, things like that. The U.S. dollar is considered the safest investment, at least right now, in the world, and a lot of investors will fly towards that asset class to protect their investment and take it out of riskier stocks. So that's basically what a flight to quality is. It usually happens during quote-unquote bear markets, when there's a recession or there's something major going on in the world, like we've just talked about. And they typically take them and put them in government securities, usually U.S.-backed treasuries or other money market funds, just have it in straight cash. But right now we're in a high inflation environment where we're averaging about 10 to 15% inflation right now. So people don't want to put them in monetary funds right now because your money's worth less and less every month as inflation continues to be a problem. But that gives you an idea of what a flight to quality is. There's also a such thing as a flight to liquidity. That's kind of a different concept, but it's related, right? Because if you have your money in stocks, that's a less liquid asset class than cash or money funds, just straight money or bonds. So people want to have their money readily accessible during these kind of events. And this is where it's important to talk about toys as an alternative investment class. It's a very, very much so illiquid asset relative to stocks or money funds, because it's not like there's an open stock market for trading these action figures other than like Hakes auction sites or eBay, right? But it's just not nearly as liquid of a site or liquid of an asset class, because you're highly dependent on who else is looking right now for those eBay auctions or Hakes auctions. So liquidity is certainly a factor that people need to keep in mind. The other thing I'll keep in mind is, are people who collect action figures recession proof, quote unquote? To me, no one's completely recession proof unless you are the ultra wealthy, hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars in assets. To a certain extent, you're definitely recession proof because you don't have an immediate need for that cash, right? Certainly they take their bumps just like everybody else during bad recessions, but what about the rest of us? The rest of us who are kind of average, everyday working Joes who collect on the side. Are we a little bit worried about having our money tied up in these things? Well, I've argued in the past that if you are worried about making ends meet, you shouldn't be buying these kind of high-end toys, but that's another thing. But I wanted to talk about some of the very, very high-grade items and very rare items that sold. We're going to start with some of the items at Hakes and then dig around from there to eBay. But, you know, one of the asset classes within collectibles is prototypes, especially vintage prototypes. These attract the ultra wealthy, right? And this is an example of one that we talked about in my Hakes market update video. This was an AFA 85 Luke Hoth outfit prototype, and it sold for above the very high estimate from Hakes. It sold for $11,033, including the buyer's premium. So these are the types of items that the very, very wealthy and potentially the recession-proof are buying. You know, there's certainly some people out there that are not recession-proof, that are capable of putting together, you know, either selling lesser quality items and buying this one item. But a lot of these buyers qualify as almost recession-proof. If you're spending $11,000 on a single action figure, that's pretty crazy. Obviously, we saw that rocket-firing Boba Fett that sold for $204,000. I mean, those are very, very expensive assets that people are viewing as potentially going to go up over time. That's the main reason a lot of these people are buying these things. Now, let's think about all the different 12-back Luke Farm Boys that we've looked at in different eBay market updates and the prices that they go for. We've seen them go for anywhere from, on the low end for ungraded, let's call it $1,500, to maybe higher grades going for $2,000 to $5,000. Well, what happens when you go from those 75s and 80s, which go in that $2,000 to $5,000 range, all the way to an AFA 85? You get items like this that sell for $21,830. So this is what I'm talking about with a flight to quality. During good times, it's almost like the exact opposite of how the stock market works, right? When it's good times and everybody's making money and everybody's doing well and assets are going up because of inflation, well, these super, super high-grade items where there's a lower population of them available, right? There's not many AFA 85 12-back B Luke Farm Boys. That's, you know, in terms of mint on card. There's just not. And I don't know what the population of these are on AFA's website, but I bet it's not very many. But the multiples that people pay to go from a 75 to an 80 to an 85, the multiples are gigantic, you know. To get an AFA 85 12-back B, Luke, you know, you're probably, like I said, you're probably talking about $5,000. Someone was willing to pay 400 or more % of that to get this AFA 85 example, only to go from an 80 to an 85. So this is a flight to quality during good times. But what happens during bad times? What happens during a recession? When the buyer pool for these types of items are less because people are maybe worried about their alternative investments. When their houses are going down in value, like in 08, right? A lot of housing values really took a hit during the 07-08 Great Recession. Well, what happens when that comes again? Because it will. It always does. You know, I'm in real estate, and I've been in 3 different recessions so far in real estate, and it always comes back. You know, there's always going to be another recession. Right now, everybody's kind of paper wealthy because the houses that they own, the houses that they're living in, have gone up in value tremendously over the last 5 to 8 years. But what happens when that changes? Maybe you don't feel quite so wealthy. Maybe spending $22,000 on an action figure doesn't make quite as much sense as it does right now. And here's an example of what I'm kind of talking about. So this is one that sold in 2017. This was an AFA 85 unpunched 2-1B on a 45 back. And that one sold for $571. This was in 2017. So let's call that a little over 4.5 years ago. Well, we just now, admittedly, this is a different card back. This is a 41A back. And it was punched instead of unpunched. It was still an AFA 85, but it sold for $2,596. So, you know, we've gone from $571 for an AFA 85 unpunched to $2,596 for an AFA 85 punched. Now, that might be the debut card, so there might be a premium associated with that. But is it a 400% premium? I would argue the answer is no on that. But this is a classic example of peak market conditions, bubble market conditions, in my opinion, within the collectible space. And could we have another continued year or 2 years of this? Sure. Sure. I think a lot of it just depends on what the global economy does. But these kind of massive multiples that we're seeing, is there a justification going from, $571 to $2,600, albeit again, it's not the exact same card back, but it gives you a rough data point in terms of what the price appreciation has been over 4.5 years. That is a massive, massive run-up. And it's concerning and eye-opening. And is this going to be worth the same? Is there a flight to quality during the next recession? Or are people going to look at these kind of prices as ludicrous and be perfectly happy with an AFA 80 or a 75? I have a 75 grade for this card right here. I paid $350 just 6 or 9 months ago for this exact card. It's it only graded a 75 plus with CAS, but this was also 4.5 years after this one, right? Versus $2,600 for this. So I just wonder whether that flight to quality is really a flight to mediocrity within the collectibles space during the next downturn. A flight to affordability, right? Versus these kind of prices. So here's another example that we talked about that blew my mind. This was an AFA 85 32 back B Bosk. An AFA 80 sold fairly recently on eBay for about $900 or $1,000. That was an AFA 80 again. It was unpunched. It was clear blister. This is an unpunched clear blister 85. You're only going up again from an 80 to an 85. Yet the price was $4,153. I mean, it's over four times the price just in a few short months. Is this bubble pricing? Is it high-end collectors wanting to have very, very expensive items? Here's another one. This one just sold on eBay yesterday. This was a 12-back C3PO AFA 90. We all know what 90s do. 90s go for big, big money. Now, this one is a single-graded AFA case. So this is early grading. So this is a really old grade. But I've heard that AFA, when they had single labels like this, they were much more strict. So getting a 90, for example, versus the 3-tier grading system that they use now, it's a lot more difficult to get the 90s back then than it is to get a 90 right now. So you could argue that this is in really, really excellent shape and that 90 probably still applies. But it's still sold for $1,975 for a 12-back C. Now, a 12-back C 3PO in kind of 80 grade condition probably sells for about half that. So the multiple isn't nearly as much on this one for a number of factors that we just talked about. Even in modern stuff, we've seen a massive run-up. Here was a U90 prototype Boba Fett VC61 vintage collection. Again, a U90 because these were sent in sealed mailer boxes to be opened and graded by AFA. This one, for the last 6 to 9 months, very consistently graded, has been $200 to $250. This one sold for $420. So maybe that's an outlier. Maybe it's a sign that the very, very upper end of collectibles are continuing to experience much more rapid price appreciation than 70s, 75s, 85s for modern stuff especially. Modern, it seems like almost you have to have a 90 in order to get any kind of massive price appreciation. Unless it's something rare, prototype, things like that. But, for a lot of these mint on cards that are standard retail releases or standard mailaways like this prototype Fett, the massive prices that you see, like this 420 sales price, It almost has to be a 90 nowadays. So, and then you get massive premiums from there. Here's another one it's a really good example of what I'm talking about. So this was a U90 2007 30th anniversary comic pack. This is one I've got in my collection, graded by CAS. Mine's graded 90 by CAS, but it's not an uncirculated grade. So this, someone sent in a sealed case of these comic packs. This just sold for $300. $300. I think even with, after buying mine and sending it and grading it and getting it sent back, paying for the shipping to and from CAS, I've got maybe 125 in mine, max. So, but this is uncirculated. So that's another factor when it comes to the collectibles asset class. Is it uncirculated? Is it at AFA 85, 85 plus, 90? So all of those things factor in. And you can see here, he's very quick to point out the AFA population report. This is the only one on the entire AFA population that's an uncirculated 90. And you can see that there. One of one. So, you know, that's something else that collectors tend to factor in, is rarity. You know, when you're talking about a flight to quality in equities and in bonds and money market, that's not rare. There's nothing rare about it. It's very easy to switch assets very quickly by calling your broker or logging into your, you know, E-Trade account and making those trades yourself. Versus this kind of item where it's a one of one, you're waiting on a seller who's willing to part with it. You're willing to, you have to wait on these super rare items. And, you know, again, the rocket firing FET that sold for 204. I think the timing was perfect for that sale, whoever that seller was. It was a peak market conditions. It was a rare item, relatively rare item. And the book of Boba Fett just ended, so Boba Fett's on the mind. Boba Fett loose and carded figures are skyrocketing in value. It was kind of a perfect storm for why that particular figure, although lower grade than past examples that sold, commanded a brand new price record. So you got to factor all that stuff in as to when, you know, timing a sale, you know, timing the market like this. Here's a very, very common figure. This is a Luke Skywalker Power of the Force 2 Luke Dagobah. This is a common figure. You can buy this mint on card for $5, I bet. $5 to $10. But what makes this rare is that this is an uncirculated 90 within the AFA case. AFA stopped uncirculated grading these Power of the Force 2 figures. So good luck, you know, you can't send one in and add a new one. So again, this comes down to rarity, where the population of these is probably pretty low. People weren't sending many of these in to get uncirculated loose grading, right? Just because they were pretty plentiful. But someone was still willing to pay $100 for it. Someone paid $100 with free shipping on that one. Now we're going to do a little comparison as it relates to a flight to quality on different grades. And I picked, because I found the data fairly easily, I picked Luke Skywalker Stormtrooper, the Luke and Stormtrooper disguise, last 17 figure. We all know that the price on these has gone up like crazy. But I wanted to show you what it's like and what the different prices are like as you progress in grade. And my question to you, the viewer, is that going to hold up when we have the next recession? Are these kind of price multiples going to hold up, or are we going to see a regression towards the lower grades by the ultra high grades? So we'll get back to that in a second, but let's take a look at the data first. So here's an AFA 80 Luke Stormtrooper old style case with the ugly label up top, the least desirable casing style for a Luke loose Stormtrooper. It was listed for $800. Best offer accepted, the price was $700. I looked it up. So $700 for an AFA 80, and all of these are fairly recent sales, by the way. Here's another one, same case, but with the label on the inside, which is more desirable. But this is an AFA 85. AFA 85. That one sold for $1,100. That one sold on February 23rd. Here's a CAS 85. That one was listed for $1,250. That one sold for $1,050, right? So CAS 85 sold for $1,050. AFA 85 old case sold for $1,100. Now this was not an 85 plus. The label says 85 plus, but it's 85. So it's $1,100 or $1,050 for a CAS 85. Now we're getting into another one. This is a newer case, brand new case style, AFA 85. So this is the most desirable presentation format because we know it's a fairly recent grade because it has the new case style. That one sold for $1,363 on 43 bids. That was December 30th. And the market's only gone up since then. So you can probably count on, I'd say easily $1,500 if this was listed today, just based on what prices have done over the last 3 months. Now we're going to look at an AFA 90. AFA 90. And as we talked about, the price multiples jump pretty quickly. Now, this is an older style case too. This is not even a modern updated case. That one sold for $2,500, $2,500. So, you know, December 30th, an AFA 85 sold for $1,363, and then an AFA 90 sold for $2,500. So you can see that massive price jump in that figure. It's just incredible. When you started off with an AFA 80 for about $700, all the way to an AFA 90 for $2,500. That's over 300%. That's 350-ish% difference in price, just going from an 80 to a 90. And my question to you guys is that price multiple going to hold up? Is that flight to quality going to hold up during the next recession? Or are people going to look at this and say, that's insane? It's insane to pay that massive price multiple. I'm not willing to pay that. So it just seems like the buyer pool for something like this is much smaller. And if and when we start to see the signs of a U.S. economy that's starting to tank a little bit, you might be wise to consider getting a lower grade figure, where whenever you do need to resell it, whenever we do start to get back to a stronger economy or stronger market conditions after the next downturn, it's going to be easier to resell, and you can always upgrade it later. But it's just a thought. Maybe you get a good deal. Maybe during a recession, somebody needs to offload the item really quickly because they got to make ends meet. They got overextended, and you get that AFA 90 for $1,500, and maybe that's a good deal during the next recession. Who knows? Then let's do a quick comparison of a carded Luke Stormtrooper. This was an AFA 80 Plus that sold on February 13th for $1,950, and then this was an AFA 85 that sold for $3,500. So just to go from an 80 Plus to an AFA 85, both yellowed blisters, one of them unpunched, admittedly, versus punched. This was the unpunched example. But you're talking about going from $1,950 to $3,500. That's a massive, massive jump, just going from an 80 Plus to an 85. So anyway, I just thought this data was kind of interesting because I'm not sure if flight to quality really holds up for the action figure asset class, the collectibles asset class during a recession. I don't know whether you're still going to see those massive price premiums when people start to panic and there's another recession hitting. It's not like there's a flight to quality like there is in stocks and bonds. And I don't know the answer to that. I'd be curious to see what happens to some of these ultra high grade items, or whether they hold up just fine because the likely buyers of these are less affected and less, they're more recession proof, as we talked about earlier. But anyway, if you're new to the channel and you like this kind of off-the-wall kind of discussion topic, I encourage you to subscribe. To my Patreon supporters as well as my current subscribers, thank you so much for the channel support and for watching, and I'll be back soon.